I'm
Yeah.
in the airport in Austin.
Okay. Wow. Well, this will be exciting.
Do I look pretty?
You look beautiful as always. As always. Absolutely. All right. Let's see if we can get started. So I'm watching both the LinkedIn feed, so that's coming in a little bit later. I will try to keep track of any messages that come up in the chat since you are at the airport. I'll try to hold down the chat if that happens, but don't hold me to that. So I'm just here to have a conversation with you. So we got about 2 minutes, but I was listening to some of Naomi Judd's music before we got started. And just kind of, we did a lot. I've done a lot of research on just the fact that she's been very vocal about her struggle, right? And I just kind of want to know what you think about that. Like, you've been in news forever for like 20 something years, right? And so, how have you experienced people who are struggling maybe with mental illness? Have you noticed the challenge with being able to communicate?
Are we are we on?
We are. Yeah.
Oh, we are. This is live. I thought you were. This was pre-show.
Yep.
Yes. Unfortunately, all those years of TV news, I was often brought into a family's life at the lowest point in their lives. The news is, somebody lost a kid to a stray bullet. Teen suicide has been big for generations. So I can't tell you how many times I was in somebody's living room talking to them just on the same day that they lost their son, and it's just heart wrenching. And every single time you hear about one of these things, we as a society say, why didn't we recognize the warning signs? And there's a lot of I think chatter about what can we do. And when somebody as big as Naomi Judd goes on, I think it was 60 Minutes or Good Morning America 4 years ago, and says that she's wrestling with depression, I just wonder what we could have done. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, and so I've done a couple of interviews, and thank you so much for allowing me to do those under the Real PR News, broadcast. But I will tell you that the question keeps coming up, like, what could we have done? What could we have done differently? And it's almost as if, and in my opinion only, it's as if you say, let's say a family member has cancer, right? And they've fought the battle and they've done the chemo and the radiation and they lose that battle to cancer, very rarely do you hear a family member say, what could I have done differently? Right? It's
Right.
definitely a paradigm shift. And mental illness is a disease, and it's not something that people choose. It's not something that people are comfortable having conversations about. And even if they are, Naomi Judd was posted as saying, like, people are so mean. Even after she did that 60 Minutes interview, the backlash on social media was just unbelievable, and
Right.
which furthers that shame, it furthers that embarrassment and that taboo. And so if people can start thinking about mental illness as a disease and not a choice,
Yes.
I think it's that first step, and which is why, you and I are working on this Creating Mental Wealth show. If we can change the thought process and
Yeah.
talk about mental illness as it applies to wealth, what
Yeah.
things do we do to make us more wealthy? Then we do more of those, right? And the things that take away our wealth. But yeah, I don't know that there's anything that we can do other than open up ourselves for conversation.
Yeah. And a Can you still hear me? We're in a loud
I
airport.
lost you for a millisecond, but you're back. Okay, let's do
All
it.
right. I would like to think that some of the conversations that are happening in homes today because of Naomi's death is causing some people to take action, because, like you mentioned, it's a disease, but disease can be treated. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on how do you know when it's just you're going through a funk? And how do you know when it's like a clinical depression?
So obviously clinical depression, and thank you for that question. It's a great question. And I've had to answer that several times over the past few days. Know that it's different for everyone. And I think that if nothing else, I can't stress that enough. We all have bad days. We all have bad, sessions in our life. If at some point it becomes very cyclical, right? Like every time something bad happens, or sometimes nothing bad happens and a person just kind of disappears when their normal activities change, right? So even Naomi, her family talks about when she would go do a tour, do a show, she would disappear for several days, right? And not necessarily take care of her physical hygiene, not necessarily eat. Those are some very like telltale signs of depression. And so for me, that one of the things that we coach our clients on is just like making sure that you notice and give boundaries. So I struggle with major depressive disorder, and my tribe knows that after I've done an event, they know I need some time to unpeople, we call it, right? But when my unpeopling goes from 12 hours to 24 to 48 to 72, there's a boundary that's been set. And I've agreed, like, if you haven't heard from me in 3 days, please come check on me, right? But again, it's different for everyone. I think my opinion and my experience is that every human has a different way of interacting. But just letting them know that you're there for them, don't try to solve it. Don't try to come up with a solution. Just show that you're there through whatever, the good days and the bad days, and be consistent with that. From my opinion, that works best. That's the first start. And if at some point that doesn't help, absolutely seek out the help of a therapist, and the therapist can help you determine if it's truly depression, along with a psychiatrist to determine if medication is necessary. But it's always best to have a conversation with someone who works in the field, and they can determine if, you're just kind of in a bad spot, which we all are after 2020, right?
Sure, sure. One of the things that struck me is that every time we have a celebrity death, Robin Williams, we say to ourselves, but they had it all. They had fame, they had fortune, they had millions of adoring fans. But Sherry, you've learned that that has nothing to do with the disease of mental illness.
It's not. And I think that is an unfortunate perception, right? People believe that financial wealth equates to mental wealth. People just assume that. And that's why we're so focused on having this conversation. Here's what mental wealth looks like. I actually had the opportunity to have a session with someone yesterday, and we documented, and I'm going to show you this. We just did like some good day words and bad day words, and we put a financial a cost to that, right? And it was so interesting at the end of the conversation, where initially she's like, I'm overwhelmed and I don't have a balance. She actually was more balanced than she thought, because she changed the way she thought about it, right? And so that's what we're encouraging, changing the thoughts and changing the conversation to, we're all mentally wealthy. Now, is our account a little unbalanced? Absolutely. Sometime let's do what we need to do to get that balance back, so that we can take control of depression. The silence is what, and I mentioned this on your show, silence is what is giving it its power, sadly, right? Because no one wants to talk about it.
I think one of the things that you mentioned on my show is how you begin your day and how you end your day is important. Your first waking thoughts, is it, I'm so grateful, I'm so fortunate that, I've got another day on earth to get it right, versus, oh gosh, I'm tired, or oh gosh, I don't feel like getting out of bed. Tell me about your morning routine. What do you do when you wake up?
Well, I'll tell you that for me, again, struggling with major depressive disorder, it's a fight every morning, right? And even though I can think, I know I need to get up, I have to do these things, I have to physically move my body in order to stop what's happening chemically inside, right? And so I have a service animal, I have a kitten, and she's very aggressive. And in that, like, if I am not moving, she's like, okay, she's doing the kneading thing, or people check on me, right? I have a team of people that will, if they've not heard from me at a certain time, they will reach out. But I will tell you that it is a struggle. It's not something that you're like, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm just going to get up at 6 a.m. Your body is almost fighting you. And I think that you hear this from some of the music from Naomi, some of the things that she said in interviews. It's a constant battle with, I know what I need to do, but my body's telling me not to. So in the morning I get up and I keep the windows open so I can see the sun. I want to hear the birds. My kitten is, waking me up, wanting me to move around, making sure that I'm not checking social media the first thing in the morning,
Yes.
because that's a withdrawal for me, right? Yeah, just to see the sadness in the world and everyone else's challenges, they become my challenges. I take those on. So I try to end the day in the same way, just thankfulness and gratefulness. But it doesn't mean that I don't have depression. It doesn't mean that I'm not still struggling. I am just putting new routines in place to try to normalize my life, right? And so
let's talk about the power of music, because she was such a recording star.
yeah.
I have songs that make me happy. Like, they take me back to high school, and every time I hear the song, I'm suddenly 17 again, driving with
Yeah,
the top down.
yeah, absolutely.
Is how important is what's on your playlist?
So, you know what? It's very interesting. So, in one of my therapy sessions a couple of years ago, I noticed that music can be either a mental wealth deposit or a mental wealth withdrawal, because just like you mentioned, that wonderful memory of being, with the top
Yes.
down, certain songs can also trigger very negative emotions and can also trigger trauma and traumatic responses. And so, the importance of the playlist is making sure that the memories that it invokes are those that will help you to heal, right? So it's a slippery slope. It's very dangerous. Personally, there was a song, and I think you and I mentioned this when I was in your studio, but there was a song that was playing when my mother found my dad, right? It was a song by a group called Enchantment, and it was called Gloria. My mom's name is Gloria, or was Gloria. And the song said, I don't want to face another day, right? So for me, I can listen to a playlist and the algorithms and Spotify know what I like, but if at some point that song comes on, then I spot the rest of my day is pretty much shot. And so music can be both a deposit, or a debit, depending on the mood you're in. Be careful if you're in an angry mood, don't put on your Eminem playlist, right? Because it will further exacerbate those negative feelings. So you got to be careful with music, making sure you understand where it takes you.
Give us some advice on helping others who are struggling with depression, because I think the hardest thing for people who are not suffering from it is, the simple advice, well, just snap out of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hear that so often. Yeah. Um, Again, the same example exists, right? Just if with any other terminal illness, you don't tell people with cancer to just snap out of it, right? But knowing that someone is there and there to listen, I think my first point of advice is the question of how are you, which we all do, and the standard response is I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm great. But taking it a step further to say, but how are you really? That resonates so deeply with someone who is used to having on this space. Again, you mentioned Anthony, you didn't mention Anthony Bourdain, but Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Robin Williams, these people are used to being on. And so when you can break that first level with someone who's struggling with depression and go, okay, you just gave me the TV answer. I want to know how you're really doing. And then you can ask specifically, have you eaten today? Can I bring you something?
Wow.
Why don't we step out for a little bit? Why don't you go ahead and hop in the shower so that I can come get you and we can just go for a walk? So it's, again, individualized. There's no broad brush way to handle it. It's each person. But the best thing is just asking the question, Sherry, how can I help you when you are in a depressive episode? What can I do to help you? And then actually do that, right? Be willing to actually follow through, because the worst thing is to tell someone that you can depend on them and then they're not there.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like an accountability partner that you're creating.
Absolutely. Yes.
How do you choose your accountability partner? Who is that? Is it a family member, or is it a friend, or?
The answer to that is yes, right? It is all of those things. And for as many people that that will support you, engage them in that, right? The chances are, for me, like everyone knows, that's the whole point of this show. It's the point of the work that I'm doing, so that literally everyone who knows me holds me accountable. But some people don't have that. They've only got a smaller kind of core of, ecosystem. But tell everybody, because if one person doesn't pick up on it, someone else will. Maybe they know something different about you. The people at your job see a different version of you than the people see you at home. So have an accountability partner at work, have one at home, have one at school. Make sure that your counselors understand that you're struggling. Again, and that's what we're trying to work on, is giving people and children K through 12 the vernacular so that they can articulate to their counselors, today I'm having a very high withdrawal day. I'm unbalanced. And so now we can proactively get in front of the behavioral issues and the attendance issues and violent behavior, right? So yeah, I think that accountability partner group should be as large as possible, in order to make sure that wherever you are, that people are able to take a look and take a listen and ask the correct questions.
I think we talked about this on my show, the long-term impact of COVID is that, right now, for the most part, we're not wearing masks anymore, and we're going about our quote normal life. But I think we're all, somewhat scarred from COVID. I mean, think about that, the loss of loved ones, the loss of jobs, shutting down an entire country really for 2 years. I mean, it was strange. And as I'm saying that, I'm kind of getting teary, because the only time in my adult life when I suffered any bouts of depression was during the 6 weeks when we couldn't use our beautiful studios. I was just there with my wife, and I love my wife. I mean, we cocooned for 6 weeks, but I was in a funk. And I think COVID is still going to play out in unpredictable ways.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't even know. It'll probably take 20 to 30 years to see the full impact, not just for the people who lived through it, but the children that were born in this era, right? When you think about the fact that the initial bonding with a newborn is facial expressions, right? And so not being able to do that because of masks and, right? I mean, the impact will be for years, for decades to come. We will see this kind of ripple effect. But knowing that, we've got to make sure that we are proactively having conversations to reconnect and re-engage, because children who were born into this age, or even coming in their formative years right now, all they saw was masks for a significant portion of their time. My son was in middle school when this happened. And so, you need to see smiles. You couldn't see smiles because people had masks on. So we've got to go right now and start kind of undoing that damage by having conversations that we couldn't have over the past 2.5 years.
Oh, sure. You just froze for a second there. Tell
I love technology, don't you? It's so awesome. We'll wait for you to unfreeze, Jeff. Okay. You moved. Okay, great. Okay.
We moved. Okay. Sorry about that. The Wi-Fi and the terminals is not really.
I understand. No worries.
What have you may have answered the question, but what have you learned about Naomi Judd's depression? What did you discover as you were doing research?
So it's been a very long struggle for her, right? And I think I'm so proud of the fact that she was willing to have these conversations out loud, well before COVID, like well before everyone started to have the conversation. So I know that she's been reaching out and searching for help for a very long time. And she's tried a lot of the things. And so I talked yesterday a little bit about kind of like a soldier. So in my mind, like she felt like she was fighting this battle, and that's what people with depression feel like. And what I don't want people to do in her passing is think ill of her. For example, if I were to go fight in a war, a physical war, even if I lost the battle, even if we lost the battle and I came home, I don't think you would judge me because we lost the war, right? I still went and I fought for as long as I could, as hard as I could. And that's what I found about her. She's been fighting this fight for a very long time. A large portion of that time, she was very vocal about her struggles. And what she found was anger and disappointment and people being frustrated and saying things exactly like what you said. How could you be depressed? You have all of this and you have done all of this and you have all of that. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. So I found that she's been a warrior in this fight for a while. I don't want anyone to feel as if she lost, like she lost the war. She fought as long as she could. And the daughter saying that she, lost her life to mental illness changes the topic. It's not, committed suicide, because that seems like an intentional, but it's losing a battle, right? It's trying and trying and trying. And my understanding is that she tried and she fought for a very, very long time. And we're very grateful for her at least starting the conversation so that you and I can continue it in situations just like this.
What have we learned about depression? Is it a chemical thing in your brain?
So I'm not a doctor. So let me just clarify that. And so we'll talk about my understanding of it. So depression is a clinical and a physiological state. But I will tell you something that I've learned very recently. Serotonin, we're familiar with the serotonin chemical that our body creates. It's created in two places. It's created in our brain and also in our gut. And so when people struggle with like GI issues, for example, they also struggle with their bodies creating this serotonin, which if your body's not creating this happy chemical, then no matter how much money you have or where you live or how much you've traveled, your body and your brain then cannot process a certain set of emotions. So watching your diet, for example, the show on our first show at your studio, I'll have John Sally. John Sally is a 100% vegan, right? Wow. And he talks also about the importance of managing your gut to manage your mental health, right? How important it is about what you eat to manage your mental health. So yes, it is a physiological state, but some people think that it's just that your brain creates these hormones. They are also created in our GI system. And so being careful about what we eat, how often we eat, how we fuel our body can also have some very good impacts on how we manage our depression and our mental health.
Is serotonin something only found in nature? Can scientists create it in a lab?
So I got to be very careful with that answer too, because you don't want Big Pharma to come after me. However, absolutely, there are medications that already exist that can help replace the serotonin that your body is not creating, or if your body's creating it, it's not receiving it or accepting it. So absolutely, there are medications. And when you have a conversation with a psychiatrist and a psychologist, they will work through what best medication would help you in your particular physiological state, right? It's not always just medication. Again, sometimes there are things that you can eat differently, different herbs, and that'll be something that I'll ask John Sally on the show to figure out if there's anything in particular that would impact kind of our serotonin production internally. But absolutely, there are medications that are available and safe and have been tested and have been used for centuries almost at this point to help with that. So that's a great question. Thanks for that.
Let's talk more about your show, because I'm so proud of you for doing it.
Yeah.
What's the mission and ministry of the show?
Wow, I love that you used ministry. And so the Creating Mental Wealth with Sherry James show is created just to have a paradigm shift around the conversation of mental illness. Hopefully, before we continue to lose as many people as we're losing to suicide. My goal and my mission and my ministry is to create, well, I've already created the curriculum for kindergarten through 12th graders to change their conversation about mental illness to mental wealth. It also teaches them how to balance checkbooks, which is something that most of our kids nowadays have no concept of, right? But if you start off the day with a balance, there are going to be things that deduct from that, and there'll be things that add to that. And I want to teach them how to articulate that. I'm so excited about the show. We've got some amazing guests that are going to be there. And they'll talk about it from different perspectives. Obviously, John Sally, we're going to talk about how financial diverse the investments can impact our mental diverse investments, because we'll be talking about cryptocurrency. I've got some other special guests that are coming that I'm not going to share with us yet. But the whole goal is to show that everyone has the opportunity to be mentally wealthy if we have the right tools, the right technology, which we all do with our smartphones and things like Zoom. So I'm super excited about it. We will be filming at your studio on May 18th with John Sally. I'm so excited. We are going to save lives with this mission.
Yes, and I'm so proud of Sherry because in addition to being the host of the show, you're the executive producer. You're the one who's deciding who the guests are, what the flow is, what the topics are. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Real News is it's your show. It's not my show. We're going to help make it look good and have the right team around you. But at the end of the day, it's your name on that show, and we want you to innovate and create like a refreshing difference in television that you and I were talking about ever since Oprah left the scene on daily talk television. It's waiting for the next Oprah, and I think it too.
That's me. I will gladly take the baton, Oprah. So when you see this, know that not only am I receiving the baton, but I will be doing it in the Oprah inspired studio at Real News PR on May 18th. So I so appreciate you, Jeff. I know you're in the airport and I know you're traveling. I'm so grateful for you spending this time with us and having this very important conversation. And so travel well, and I will see you on May 18th. How's that?
Wouldn't miss it. All right. Love you, girl.
Thanks. I love you too. Bye.